Thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name is James Hong. I'm from Artificial Intelligence International Institute. It's a think tank I founded that advocate sustainable AI for humanity. I'm very glad to be invited by TriceCon and World AI Show for a topic that is very personal to me. First of all, before I introduce the speaker, do self-intro. Just a quick one. I'm curious how many of you are aware of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal? Can you raise your hand? SDG? Oh, that's less than 20-30%. So I was invited. So I was thinking one of the purpose for this panel is to first bring awareness about what AI can or cannot do. Why is the United Nations SDG, or Sustainable Development Goal, are relevant? So before we start, maybe I think they already introduced the background, but I can actually introduce one more time. Right, Richie, Dr. Richie Lee from UOB. Maybe Richie, you want to do an introduction about yourself, what you do at UOB for this area. Thank you.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richie Lee. I spent the last 25 years in the area of energy and sustainability, essentially working as the head of energy or head of sustainability or chief sustainability officers at various multinational companies throughout Asia. I came back to Singapore 5 years ago, and now I'm the head of sustainability for the real estate division at UOB, the United Overseas Bank in Singapore, taking charge of the sustainability for all of our UOB buildings globally. Thank you.
Thank you. Khalid, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Khalid. I'm a IT director for Ecolab. Been in the IT sector for about 30 years now. Sustainability is really a personal passion for me, and Ecolab is one of the organizations which is working very closely on clean water, sanitation kind of initiatives as well. So it kind of brings my organization and my passion together, right? So I'm looking forward to basically sharing some insights on sustainability and AI, how they can work together, pros and cons. What I would like you all to take away from me, at least today, is AI is a good slave, but can be a bad master.
Okay, thank you. Simon?
So Simon Long, the Director of Technology Strategy and Transformation for CBRE. And like many of you thinking, what is a real estate services providing company doing in here? Well, from a buildings perspective, the construction and operation of buildings attributes to circa 60% of carbon emissions every year. So we're using and looking at AI to optimize that building operation. And on the flip side of that, using it to sort of augment the customer experience side of things.
Excellent, excellent. So before we start the question, I'd like all of you, by the end of the session, have some takeaway about the SDG and how AI is relevant to that. At the same time, do prepare some really interesting and tough questions for our panel of experts. So the United Nations SDG has 17 goals. Actually, it's an amazing thing that they have done to get the whole world to agree on 17 goals that all of us as humanity needs to address. So if you're not sure, do a search on Google and find out. So as part of the learning process, maybe I start with Richie again. You can share with us your work at UOB or what you have done before that, how you have used AI to actually achieve the United Nations SDG goal. Yeah.
I think I'll just focus on the application of intelligence, AI, in the energy efficiencies projects that I've been involved in. So essentially, a very good example is to install what we call the smart energy management system or the smart building management system to any buildings or to any system of machines. It can be in the commercial sector or it can be in the manufacturing sectors. So you can imagine the BMS or the EMS will collect all these many different types of massive amount of data of the machines, of the energy consumptions, and there's a intelligence that can analyze the data, find out any sort of relationships with problems like machine failures or breakdown or energy consumptions, and therefore is able to forecast potential impending machines breakdowns, and is able to automatically send out alarms to the facility management team to start looking into problems of potential problems. So that's one example. The other example is to look for any irregular behavior of the energy consumption patterns, any anomaly, and therefore again send out alarms to the maintenance team to start exploring potential problems. You can even conduct a root cause analysis based on some sort of time series analysis or any other type of statistical analysis, so that you can look for potential or reasons for the potential failures, and therefore you're able to predict and prevent problems, similar problems in the future. I think that's one good example of what
I see.
AI can do.
Okay, so my takeaway is that you're using AI to achieve some green type of impact, as well as mitigating risks as well.
Yes.
Using the technology.
Yes.
This is my takeaway from your work that you have done, right? Khalid?
Sure. Yep. Thank you, Dr. James. So, first of all, from Ecolab standpoint, as I mentioned, we are into clean water management, waste management. We are a chemicals company, right? So, areas which Ecolab has really focused is on ensuring that the products and solutions we offer to our customers use minimum water, right? So if you kind of walk into any of these supermarkets and buy any dishwashing soaps and detergents, you'll find most of it are liquid packaged products, right? What Ecolab has moved more into is solid products, where you can just kind of use minimum water and use the product for as long as possible. That's basically, again, tying in with one of the SDG goals of water management and clean water, sanitation, etc. The other area where we have been working very efficiently is in terms of our supply chain. So making sure we are minimizing the input of the raw materials and the packaging materials into our manufacturing facilities in a way that there are not very long transportation kind of requirements, right? So we believe in having a small manufacturing site at every country level, probably in Southeast Asia, maybe 2 countries, 1 manufacturing site, in a way that we can make sure we are able to cater to the needs of that particular geography within that geography itself, right? Last point I want to mention is purely, as I said, I'm an IT person. So from an IT point of view, we have been working very diligently on how to make IT green, right? So mainly in terms of what's the life cycle of our devices. In any organization where there are people, there are so many devices. I'm talking about computers, laptops, servers, and other devices like mobile devices, etc. Right? So typically, large organizations have a 3 to 4 to 5 year span of usage of a device. So one of my objectives has been to look at how can we expand this more in a way that we are enhancing the life of the device, one. Second, when it comes to the end of life, don't just throw it away, right? Yes, we do work with e-waste management companies, but don't just throw it away. Look for opportunities where we can give it to some orphanages or organizations which can really make use of these devices. So,
okay, I understand. So basically, water positive impact aligned with one of the SDG goal.
Yeah.
You also mentioned supply chain risks, which we're all facing right now with all the inflation. Economics impact is big. And IT, green IT, right? Okay, that's a good takeaway. Simon?
Yeah, so from a buildings operation perspective, we're really focusing on efficiency. And the reason for that is, if you think about driving a car down the motorway, any of the modern cars that we're driving now, your hybrids or whatever, you'll get this efficiency measure on the dashboard, which is telling you where you are. And you'll know when you're driving along, it's sixth gear, 60 miles an hour on the motorway, and that's when you get in this sweet spot of efficiency. But when you consider a building, it is not always in sixth gear at 60 miles per hour on a motorway. One of the things that's really thrown this into the wind is hybrid working at the moment. We've got these offices, these huge buildings that on a Monday and a Friday are 40% occupied because everybody's working from home. But those buildings are still running at the same energy consumption and rate that they were as if they were 100%, right? So there's a variable that's been changed and not adapted. And that when you think about that from an efficiency perspective in buildings, it scales much more than just thinking about turning lights off. To Khalid's point, if we've got people going in there, cleaning toilets that haven't been used because nobody's in there, just following the standard routine of we do it every 2 hours or whatever, right? There's wasted water, there's wasted chemicals, there's additional chemicals being used. You think about that in terms of the desks, because we're cleaning a lot more in meeting rooms now. That's a big use of chemicals as well. And what we're finding is that those chemicals are actually then damaging some of the materials because it's being cleaned more frequently with harsher chemicals. So then you've got an increased disposal rate of things that would be good if we just slowed that down. And then if you think a little bit further than that, that would be a delivery, which is a truck off the road, it's less travel. So there are really wide-reaching implications for sustainability in the environment by getting that efficiency down. And there's too many variables to have a simple if this, then that model. Mm-hmm. So for things like the BMS and the EMS system that you were mentioning, Richie, we want to AI enable those to understand how many people are planned to come into the building, who is in the building now, can we contain them to areas to increase efficiency? And when we've run some of these samples, we've seen some very interesting models. And when you start bringing a smaller group, say we've got, this building 10 floors, and we only open 4 of the floors up, you start mixing different teams of people together, and they start collaborating, and the business starts to see other effects. So, it's not just about saying sustainability will do this, but it can really unlock much wider aspects, and I think it's important to look at that.
Okay. My takeaway is that what you guys are doing is actually making our living on urban lifestyle more efficient and more energy efficient in many other way, maybe other aspect as well, right? In the real estate business.
When you decide to come into the office, yeah.
Okay.
If we work from home, we're not managing that yet.
Okay.
Yet.
Good. I want to move to the next question. It may sound really obvious, right? It's like SDG, United Nations SDG is a big goal. 17 is really very, very difficult, right? Why do you want to do it? It's going to cost you more money, potentially. It's going to create more risk as well, because AI itself has risk as well, right? I just want you to share from any one of you, why do you want to do it? How do you convince your organization to go about doing it? Any one of you?
Look, I can start. So, as I mentioned, water is a big thing for us, right? So if I just look at one of the SDG goals, which is clean water, sanitation activities, and we all know that water is a limited resource. So one of the areas, and from an AI standpoint, we have been very conscious in terms of using the data in a meaningful way. You're gathering a whole lot of data day in and day out, but if you process everything and then look for the outputs, you're basically adding to the problem more, right? It's not like the data, you put it in the pipeline, it will tell you without getting processed what you need to do. So it's more in terms of we have all this data, but we want to have the clear end goal in mind, process the data in a way that it really gives meaningful outputs. And then that's basically what we use for introducing new products or new solutions to our customers and new markets.
So Khalid, I'll follow up a little bit on this. You're saying is that if you build a lot of system that generate lots of data, and that could create more problem.
Right.
So, and therefore, actually, even though we have good intent, but we may actually end up creating more harms.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'll give you a fact, right? So, just a question. Have you heard of the CO2 emissions? Anyone? Right, I guess most of you
CO2
have.
management, right?
No, the carbon footprint and carbon emissions, right? Most of you would have heard. Do you know how many pounds of carbon footprint does a human generate in 1 year?
I see.
It's only 11,000 pounds in 1 year, normal human being. Whereas using AI in 1 year, like with the whole data processing, can be 600,000 pounds for a year.
I see.
So just imagine what I'm saying, right? Just putting it in a context, data-based way.
I'm so glad, Khalid, we have brought up this thing. Before I get to Richie and Simon, right? How many of you heard about this large language model? This is the biggest trend in AI in the last few months. The large language model are like GPT-3, DALI, Lambda. Heard about this recent Google controversy? They are running big, huge data model, right? Which is like what Khalid has mentioned, and it's going to use a lot of energy to produce it. And there's something we can talk more later on. Yeah, just want to bring to your awareness. You have not looked at this large language model. Back to the same question. Now, Khalid has brought up something that I thought is very relevant. Maybe Simon or Richie, you want to comment on why you are doing it now at your organization for a big bank like UOB, right?
Okay, why we are doing sustainability
Using AI.
or doing SDG, I think in general, it's increasingly clear to all of us that climate change is a real problem, right? It's an impending doom. And it's not something that we should goods to have, but it's actually something that we must do in order to protect ourselves. I mean, we all know that the sea level has been rising, global temperature has been increasing, and it is a real problem. Nothing to hide away from and nothing to escape from. I mean, I've been in this line for the last 25 years, and when I first started, there's a lot of greenwashing and a lot of concern about payback. You know, even if a sustainability project is very good, but if the payback is longer than 2.5 years, a lot of the CEO or CFO will not want to do a project because the payback is just too long. And over the years, you realize that the acceptance of a longer payback has been happening. Nowadays, the private sector is probably willing to accept a payback ROI of about 8 to 10 years. So it has been improving. But the worries is whether that is quick enough. The things that globally people are doing in terms of climate change, sustainability mitigations, is it fast enough? You know, we all heard about the Paris Agreement, right? That we all have to maintain increasing global temperature compared with the pre-industrialization time to keep it below 1.5 degrees Celsius, or else it will be a point of no return for the whole planet. And guess what? Now, as of today, we have heard the global temperature has already increased by about 1.1 degrees Celsius. So that's not too far away from the 1.5 degrees Celsius. We talk about carbon emission. So the pre-industrialization time, the carbon emission was about, in the atmosphere, is about 200 ppm. So in fact, the composition of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is very small. 200 over ppm part per million is only about 0.02% in the whole atmosphere. You know, the rest is oxygen, nitrogen, and today it has about double. So now it's about 400 plus ppm, 0.04%. Now don't play down on that increase of 0.02%. It has caused the global temperature to increase by 1.1 degrees Celsius. And we have to protect ourselves not to reach or bypass 1.5 degrees Celsius because it affects the whole life and death of all of us. It may not affect our current generations, it will not kill us, apart from the increasing global temperature or the tsunami, but think about our next generation and our grandchildren's generations. So that is one of the key reasons why sustainability is so important for good companies, for various MNCs, including for banks such as UOB and any other responsible banks. So that we call it responsible banking.
I think
Okay.
Dr. Richie brought a very good point about, like sustainability. How many of us really understand what's sustainability, right? So it's basically we use what we need in an efficient manner, and we basically think about the future generations. Limited resources, we don't want to consume everything, but there's this linear economic model where we just take, make, use, and throw. But what I would like to for our audience to think about is in a more circular way, right? So when we take, make, how do we use it, reuse it, recycle it, make sure that whatever we have taken has the longest possible and efficient usage and life, and only then we think in terms of recycling or wasting it.
So Khalid, let me related to the response to Richie, right? Do you think AI will really help? Or is it going to add more problem to it? I'm seriously. Yeah.
No, as I mentioned, right? So it's a good slave, but can be a bad master. So
I see.
the point is, we are not going to stop generating and using the data, right? So that's something we have been doing. We will continue to do. The key point is how meaningfully we use what we are gathering in a way that we can think from the end goal point of view, right? What is it that we want to achieve? Every organization, every individual wants to achieve something. So if we are clear with that purpose, then I think AI should be very helpful.
We're going to come back to this topic. I want to give a chance to Simon to still answer the question of why do you advocate for it towards the sustainable development goal using AI, right, at your company?
Yeah, so from our perspective, why are a lot of organizations doing this? Well, there's two reasons in business. Effectively, it's beneficial to do it, or you have to do it, right? You cut straight through it. Those are the reasons why a lot of decisions at the top end, and you'll forgive us the generations before, the money makers who sit in those positions do it. Now, the good thing in places like Singapore is when you have the BCA, the Building Construction Authority, set targets. By 2030, you need to hit these objectives. You need to be green. You need to do this. So that's the have to. What we want to try and do is make sure you hit the have tos and it's beneficial to do that. So if you get both, then you've really got a driver for business. The difficulty we've had is making that simple to understand. So where does AI fit into that? Well, when you have a very, very complex number of parts in a building, it's very easy, and I'll give you an example. The most efficient office here in Singapore is one that's hot and dark, right? Turn off all the AC, close the blinds so it doesn't make the place any hotter, right? But that is not a good experience. Nobody's going to want to work in there. You have to strike a balance. And when you consider that we've got things like occupancy, the number of people that places, the number of people that are in the building, the outside weather, the outside temperature, what's being done on that day? Is it sitting at working at a desk? Is it meetings? Is it conferences? Is it clients that you've got coming in? There are so many variables that AI can really optimize that through efficiency. And that efficiency is we use three terms when we do a smart building: efficiency, environment, and experience, right? Now, efficiency, when something's efficient for me, I get a really good experience. When something's really efficient and things are turning on and off, it's going to be really good for the environment. So optimizing efficiency through AI gives us both. And that's why we're doing it. Then people want to do it, it is beneficial to do it, and it helps them achieve the targets that they have to. And that's the way that we're really sort of building our projects out and focusing on it. And to be honest, given all those variables, IoT sensors on everything and all that data we have to go through, AI is just probably, other than employing a whole team of people and using more power to do it, the most optimal way of achieving that outcome.
So, Simon, if I summarize, you and your organization are convinced and committed to drive AI towards SDG, right?
I am. Yeah, I am.
You are,
Yeah,
okay.
indeed, yeah.
So now we're going to get into the interesting part of the subject, right? Because I've been in the AI since 86 myself, 30 over years. I've seen the transition over these 30 over years. So I don't think we should take AI as it is that it's going to work, right? Basically. First of all, the SDG goal as a humanity is complex. 17 of them to arrive at a consensus, at least agree on the goal, is actually a major accomplishment. Second, Richie has mentioned climate change, or Khalid as well, climate change. So it's a very complex subject. I'm not an expert in it, right? Also, lots of complexity. Third, AI as a technology itself is also very, very complex. It's not as simple as what people have looked at. Now we're mixing all these three things together, right? Complex humanity problem with a SDG, complex climate and all, and complex technology, because AI as a technology is a game changer, right? It's about mimicking ourselves. So what are the downsides? What are the risks? I want to open with Richie, because in our prior conversation, you brought up this thing, right? So,
Well, I think first of all, we can't overemphasize the potential benefits of AI, right? And to me, AI's so-called artificial intelligence is nothing more than an intelligent mathematical modeling of things. And theoretically, anything can be modeled as a mathematical model. And you think in terms of what I call the 4I. The first I is the input, the various inputs. The second I is the interaction. Third I is the integration among all these inputs. And therefore, the fourth I is the resulting impact. So you have different sort of inputs and different sort of interaction, interrelationship, integration among all these inputs to create some sort of impact. And any system can be modeled. So you can think in terms of, let's say, the renewable energy project. Now we talk about solar, talk about wind. So the inputs, and going forward in the future, there will be more and more distributed, independent sources of renewable energy. You can have solar panels on top of each of the HDB blocks, wind in different parks. So all these different isolated renewable energy sources will start to supply their input of clean electricity to the national grid. And how would a grid be balanced, taking into consideration all these different types of inputs coming from different renewable energy projects to satisfy the demand at a certain point in certain location? So you need to have an AI to control the renewable energy, the grid, in order not to collapse the grid. So that's one example, and AI can do that quite well, taking into the inputs of various renewable energy projects, the interaction between the wind and the solar energy, and the balancing, satisfying the demand on a second-by-second basis. It can even forecast, for example, the wind pattern in the next 3 days or a week, so that you know exactly how much power will be produced by this wind turbine or the sunshine, and therefore you can forecast and optimize your supply and satisfying the demand of your end users. So that's just one example. So I see very good benefits coming from AI, but nothing is perfect, like back to James' questions, when it comes to AI for SDG. Now it's interesting, you might realize that AI are mostly researched and developed in advanced countries, like Western countries. And usually AI, the research or the project or the program, is based on the values and the needs and the various parameters of the country where the AI is being developed. And therefore, if you use this AI program developed in a westernized country, because of the inputs are different, the values are different, and it might not be customized or applicable in developing countries, in a low-income countries. And therefore, there is inequalities, because the lower-income country may not be able to use the AI program effectively, because it is customized to the needs and the values of the advanced countries. And that is one. And they may not be rich enough to pay for the AI program. And therefore, there are inequalities, and it will affect the SDGs. In fact, SDGs, like James mentioned, has 17 goals. It has about 169 targets. Well, easy to remember, 17 goals, 170 targets. And there is a research being done that concludes AI can benefit about 130 targets out of the 170 targets, but it may also hinder, that means negatively impact about 60 targets because of these inequalities of the development of the AI program. Just one example.
Wow, I'm very, very impressed by your answer. Really, very impressed. Because I'm listening to you. The 4 I's, I learned something new today. I hope you all take away. And I think that is actually well articulated. Also, I think there are 2 words I think Richie has mentioned. I think he mentioned the word balance, right? I think there's no right and wrong answer. Finding a balance is where humanity wisdom needs to come in, because it's a judgment call. And again, also, Richie has mentioned about values, right? AI system can be made and designed by human, at least at the initial stage. The value will define that. So I think the SDG actually has a value to define what our common value is, right? Before we start using AI. Even though we are going to use AI to solve the 130 problems, it may cause the other problem as well, right? So I think there is a circular interdependency, right? So appreciate Richie's answer. Now I would like to, Simon or Khalid, feel free to answer the same question, right?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. James. So just taking a hint of what Dr. Richie mentioned, right? The inequalities. So actually, the world is divided into 2. The northern hemisphere is far more advanced in AI than the southern hemisphere. I'll give you actually in the southern hemisphere, it's only Australia and New Zealand which have really advanced, developed AI usage, whereas the rest of the countries, be it Latin America, Africa, or even Asia Pacific, right? So there's not much. And unfortunately, that's where we have big problems as well, right? Like I spoke about water, hunger, poverty, education, lack of education. These are large problems in the southern hemisphere. And again, going back to my roots of IT, most of the raw materials which are used in any kind of device production come from many countries in Africa. And there's a huge problem in terms of child abuse, slavery, young children as young as 6 years old working in mines, extracting these products. So that's where we can use AI better, right? So those are you can see the very, very distinctly, right? There's the positives of AI where we are getting all this raw materials to build our supercomputers and make better use of the information. But at the same time, how are we doing it is one area where we can really focus on improving the lives.
I'd like to add to both Khalid and Richie has mentioned about AI was created, right? Actually utilized in the developed country. 30 over years ago is mainly the US. Nobody in the world except a little bit in Europe, some in Israel, and some in Japan. Right? In Asia, we actually have very little AI. So I think the world actually has become more equal in a sense because of the development, right? So same thing, same questions to Simon, because you and I have spoken before about the risk, right, of running this big infrastructure with AI.
Yeah, and I would say there are a lot of risks as you go through it, and a lot to be contained. And touching on 2 points from Khalid and Dr. Lee, Dr. Lee was saying balance, and in Khalid, where you're saying slave versus master, right? So and they're very, very valid points. To put them into context, if I take my building model, and as I said, we're looking at environment, efficiency, and experience. And there is a lot of AI being put out there for experience. Like you mentioned, DALL-E creating pictures. That's just experience, right? Chatbots and engines giving people good experience, right? Take the other end, and AI is thinking, I've got to churn that out, I've got to churn that out. And these models are constantly being churned in that background, right? And that's shaping the systems that we use. So I put an AI in my building, and I'm telling it, run this building with a balance between experience with humans that are in there and the efficiency of the environment. What if it flips? What if it decides, actually, I'm going to go all out experience, because I'm used to experience. I'm used to giving everybody what they want and what they ask for and what they need. And then the environment suddenly goes haywire, and it's allowing everybody to have their own temperature, and then the HVAC's going overloaded, and everything, everybody's on every floor, and people are deciding what's supposed. How do we rein that in? How do you rein that in effectively? How do you even see that it's beginning to happen without constantly monitoring it? So that's a big risk. Take the risk in the other end. Say it decides to go super, super efficient on a building. And remember what I said, a super efficient building is very dark, very hot, nobody's going to want to be in there. Everybody's going to think the whole project's going to fail. Nobody's going to trust it ever again. It gets ripped out, never to be seen. So there is that concept between, balance, maintaining an overview. And I think this is true for anything that we do with AI, is making sure that there is a balance, making sure that there is effectively a governance over that system to validate and check that the correct things are happening, and just keep that control over it, because there is a lot of margin where it can go wild.
Excellent. I think you mentioned the word balance again, right?
Yeah.
I think that is a key word. Also, from my professional perspective, the equilibrium or balance is important. You also mentioned about governance as well. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to cover that. There will be another future session about trustworthy AI, responsible AI, accountable AI. How do we make sure we can deliver on that? I'd like to open the floor, because we have 3 minutes left. Anybody has any interesting or challenging questions for our panel? No question? Is that obvious? Okay. Anybody? Okay.
Oh, we've got one on.
I can't see.
I think this.
Yes,
Yep.
Go ahead. Somebody, yeah.
Can you hear me? Oh, yes. Okay.
Hello, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, panelists. This was a very engaging session. I really liked hearing what you had to say. I work in healthcare, so I was wondering, sustainability-wise, what advice can you give in terms of reducing waste and how it can be implemented into healthcare sector?
Can you hear it so far?
Not
About
really.
how
Healthcare.
we can use AI to reduce waste
Waste in healthcare.
Any experience to share? Yeah. Waste management.
I can talk a little bit about some of some systems that we've looked at. Waste is key within general building systems at the moment. Waste management, waste optimization is something we're talking about quite frequently as well. And what does that look like? Well, that scales all the way from where now we have recycling bins throughout that, putting scales in each one of those bins to understand the amount and types of waste that are coming out. So that's kind of a first point, is getting the data on what types of waste you say. And I think we all know that data is the key before you can create information, and information gives you insights, and insights become actions, right? So get the data on what types of waste you're coming out. I mean, we know when you go into a biomedical, biohazard bag, it's got everything in there, right? So maybe it's a case that we're saying X amount of biohazard waste, we actually need to subsort now to optimize, because there will be plastics and glass within that. And maybe there is better optimizations we can take around that. Now, what we will start to do is see patterns. And where I think AI will play a role in that is, once you've got that data about what types of waste that you have, patterns for when and where that waste is collected from, where it is, where it is peak, where it is above average. For example, if you've got hospital A, hospital B, broadly the same scope, but one is producing far more waste of one type. Why is that? AI will be able to look through that data and pull out those insights for you to start doing some assessment and take action on.
Yes. Any other questions? In fact, I want to add to what Simon has mentioned is that there are some tasks AI and machine can do a lot better than human, right? So analyzing all this data is one area, especially learning on its own. Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think Khalid blew my mind by saying the North Hemisphere and the South Hemisphere. And I think it's all about the data that we are feeding. The data now in the AI is all about the North Hemisphere. And they have a lot of biases, like the gender bias, color bias, and there are so many biases that the data has. So any suggestion on how to overcome these biases? Because I think if you start using the current database, I think it will have those biases.
Hey, good question. Thank you. I think Dr. James started with SDGs, right? And it's a UN thing, it's a global thing, right? But I think one of the things which is missing is from a governance point of view, right? Although we have these 17 goals and Dr. Lee mentioned about 170 measures, but what is not probably thought about in detail is how do we bring this holistically to the whole world, right? Like how do we measure it like from a global point of view? It's not just setting goals, but also having measures. And that's probably where we are lacking at this point in time. And maybe we need to improve a lot in that area. That's the only way to really work out this problem, right? And if I may, on the waste question, I think personally, sustainability starts at an individual level. If I decide that I want to live a sustainable life and start making the difference, I can add value to my family, and it just becomes more of a community thing, right? So it just think about it, not like how you can become more sustainable in terms of what you do on a daily basis.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
Are we running out? Oh, go ahead.
Okay, something. Yeah, I think at a higher level, apart from the imbalance, there are many other potential risks of AI applications, including the safety risk, the transparency risk, and also the accountability risk. So all these have to be taken into consideration for any nations to come out with policies and guidelines to minimize those lack of transparency, risk, lack of safety, and even lack of accountability. Because when you use AI program, and if a lot of things are not being announced or disclosed, there's a lot of a lack of transparency, and who is accountable if the AI program makes a mistake in their forecast or in their optimization solutions. So all these have to be taken into consideration and managed properly by national policies and guidelines, which is still in the process of development right now.
I think we run out of time, right? Yeah. So I'd like to give each one of you a last statement. Anything you want to leave with the audience? Richie? Or Simon? Just any statement you want to leave behind.
I think we've summed it up that AI is potentially a wonderful tool in the right hands,
Okay.
and we just need to balance all of that equally and be responsible with it.
Yeah.
Khalid?
I think I would say two things, right? One on AI and one on sustainability. So from an AI standpoint, as I mentioned, we really need to start with the end goal in mind, right? What are we looking for from this humongous amount of volume of data which we are gathering? And always think, what is the end goal? What do we want to achieve out of it? Every organization has a strategy. Sustainability has to be one of it. And that's basically where AI can be used better. On the sustainability front itself, need to think of at a grassroots level, start from me, you, and then bring it forward.
Richie?
Yeah, I think quickly, I think climate change is for real, and we can't run away from it. And it's like COVID is real. You remember 2 years ago, a lot of people still don't believe in the potential problems or impact caused by COVID, but it's a reality now, and there probably will be more viruses coming on their way. And in that great sense, climate change is a real problem, and we all have to do our part using AIs or using any other feasible solutions to fight against climate change.
Thank you to all three of you. I personally learned a lot. In fact, I took down all the notes, right, for all this thing. The AI for good is a big subject. In fact, it's the next big thing we need to look at, not just AI. And some of the questions have been asked about equality. Come to my talk at 2 o'clock. I'll share with you about sustainable AI for humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.